Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and let us be among the last to wish you a very happy New Year. Hope everybody had a great Tuesday into Wednesday, New Year's, which holidays this year have been weird. We all know that, but hopefully everybody got a chance to enjoy their new year happy, healthy, and safe, getting ready for hopefully a very fun 2025. But we got a great show for you guys today because even though we had a pretty decent new year, the Penguins closed out 2024 on the losing side of things. However, one player made sure that he is getting a fresh start before that ball dropped on New Year's Eve. Plus, the blue line seems like they're getting healthy quickly, which is just in time for a hectic stretch of 9 out of 14 games on the road for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then we will close things out by looking back to find the best Pittsburgh Penguins moment of 2024. Let's get this started on the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Kicking things off for 2025 by talking about Drew O'Connor, who coming into 2025 has no goal drought, because that was a huge thing for him for months. He had not scored since October 18th. And to put that into perspective, that was game 6 of this season. The Penguins are getting ready to play their halfway mark game in the next week or so. That's how long he went without scoring. Unfortunately for him, it has cost him ice time. It has cost him a lot in the eyes of the fan base, but he's able to get back on the scoreboard and not just do it once, but do it twice against the Detroit Red Wings. He scored the tying goal late in the first period, which was his 4th of the season, off a beautiful setup by Cody Glass. And then he scored the tying goal in the 3rd period for his first power play goal of his career. And after that first goal, it kind of looked like it woke something up in him. He was certainly playing well. So with that said, Horwat, what did you think of him being able to end the drought against the Detroit Red Wings? And also, how big would it be if Drew O'Connor reverts back to his late season form as we move forward into 2025?
Well, it'd be huge to see him revert to that sort of form, because we know that's what he's capable of. We know he can bring all those things to this team. It was big for him to get the monkey off the back. I think that's sort of the quote that you'll hear a lot about when it comes to guys not scoring for long stretches of time. For these sort of slumps, it's once they get the monkey off the back, it kind of snowballs into something more. And for Drew O'Connor, it just happened, a couple periods later. He picked up his 2nd. That's a great start for him. It's a matter of time of just now holding on, keeping on that pace, getting on the right rhythm, and bringing exactly what you're asking about here, bringing that sort of play from last year, because we all know he can do it. And being it wouldn't be a new piece to the lineup, obviously, but adding another level to wherever he is. He can play anywhere, in the bottom 6, up in the top line. It's another offensive boost that this team will probably need, especially if, Crosby's not scoring at his normal rate, but if guys like him aren't scoring, it's going to have to be a group effort, and Drew O'Connor needed to be a big part of it.
Yeah, when you look back at that last 18-game stretch for Drew O'Connor late last season, he had 12 points, 7 of them goals for the Penguins, and he was an integral factor into the Penguins actually pushing for that playoff spot and getting back into the race so late in the season last year, playing almost exclusively on that top forward line once Jake Guentzel was traded away. And that's when we all kind of, had our expectations rise a little bit for this kid, because coming into last year, we had said this is the year that he puts his stamp on being an everyday NHLer. And for him to, by the end of the season, be a guy that we could say, hey, he can actually not just survive, but thrive at times in a top 6 role. That was a large jump for Drew O'Connor. Now, I think he kind of brought everybody back down to earth with this slump. And I'm not going to say that it kind of reverted him back to, hey, he needs to prove that he's an everyday NHLer, because I think he's already there, bar none. But what I think it did was it let everybody know, okay, this is a bottom 6 guy that had a really good stretch in the top 6, not a guy that you can kind of just allow to stay in the top 6 and he's going to be able to make his way out of a funk. But, seeing him score those 2 goals, seeing him following those 2 goals, be able to play at the level that he did against Detroit, you're hoping that that carries over into 2025 because you need more options like that. The one thing that they have had is a lot of talent, a lot of contributions from the kind of nondescript guys, the Drew O'Connors, the Phil Tomasinos, the Cody Glasses, the Blake Lizottes. They haven't been able to get that at a very consistent clip. And you're not expecting that as we move forward here, but you want it to be more consistent than what we've seen out of some of these guys. So if Drew O'Connor is able to kind of take this, run with it, and be the guy he was late last season, that is invaluable to the Penguins. As you mentioned, whether that's putting him up on a line with Evgeni Malkin. I don't think you touch the top line, to be completely honest right now, but whether that's putting him up on a line with Evgeni Malkin because they're trying to find that third piece, Bunting, Malkin fitting well together, playing well together. But we've seen Beauvillier now get another opportunity up in the top 6. We've seen Cody Glass bump up into that line. Maybe it's time to let Drew O'Connor bump up into that line now that he has kind of gotten the monkey off his back, per se. But it's huge if he's able to perform at that level on the top 6. It's great because he got a more consistent goal scorer. But if he's able to do that in the bottom 6, I mean, it's the conversation we always have. To find consistent bottom 6 scoring would be a huge advantage for the Penguins, one that they haven't had the luxury of very often in the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, it's all they're looking for. It's just that little advantage of, like you said, the little advantage of bottom 6 scoring. He could play and run the lineup, even if he gets the bump to play alongside of Evgeni Malkin. It's still definitely a testament to just how, it's weird saying this team is deep because it's a lot of bottom 6 guys, but if it's deep anywhere, it's deep in the bottom 6, and this team has got depth in that. So you're able to filter guys up, and you just have to essentially hope they do well. And for Drew O'Connor, I think there's a bit more of a guarantee for it, rather than an Anthony Beauvillier now, rather than the beginning of the season. There's a bit more of a guarantee from Drew O'Connor rather than a random AHL call-up. As much as we would want to see Valtteri Puustinen get a chance, it's just seems unlikely. The way we would have liked to have seen Jesse Puljujarvi get a chance in the lineup doesn't seem to be happening. The Penguins like the guys they have. They like their group, and they're going to roll with it until noted otherwise. And the fact that the forward core is pretty much all go, fully healthy, it doesn't seem to be making any changes anytime soon. I mean, Kevin Hayes is still a healthy scratch, so it's going to be interesting to see how they filter out the lineup if they need to start making changes.
Now, I'll just say this. They could use some more finishing on that third line in general because, Phil Tomasino, still like the acquisition, but he's gone a little bit cold here over the last 10 games. He had 3 goals in his first 5 games as a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins. He has 1 in his last 10, and that's when he just shot it off of a New York Islanders defender into the back of the net the other day. So his goal-scoring touch has kind of faded away. Cody Glass, who's been very good all season, still only has 1 goal to his name. So you're hoping that somebody starts to finish because we've seen moments where that line looks very good. They're just not able to put the puck in the back of the net. So now if you have Drew O'Connor starting to finish a little bit more, if you could get one of these other guys to kind of find that touch again, that would be absolutely massive for the Penguins because as we've mentioned several times, the first line is clicking on all cylinders. Michael Bunting, more often than not, seems like he's on his game. Erik Karlsson's finding his game. The defense, which we'll get to in a minute, starting to get a little bit healthier, starting to play a little bit better. Again, they're not playing best defense in the league defense, but they're certainly not being as bad as they were early in the season. So the Penguins are starting to trend in the right direction in almost all categories. And that's something that a month ago would have been kind of hard to imagine, hard to pick out coming into 2025.
It would have been. Like we said last episode a couple of times. I mean, they're finishing up games in the playoff positioning. They're not, like I said, they're not finishing the nights. They're not ending going into the next day as, holding down wild card spots, but they are close enough that whenever they seal a win, if they seal a win, it's popping them into the wild card position. They're on that doorstep, and it's just a matter of finding the right combination of wins at the right time, and which should be most of them. And being on that doorstep, mid-November, you're saying that, and everyone's laughing at you. But no, here they are, actually turned it around quite a bit. And it's time for them to just break through. get back into that race and stay in that race if possible. You need all the right guys to click at the right time. Drew O'Connor picking up some offense is going to be a huge part of that as well for the depth or the top six, wherever he ends up playing. But you need as many guys finding their offensive rhythm as possible, especially with their positioning, which is right now still a point out of a playoff spot. No one played yesterday, so it didn't change.
Yeah, now they are still under 500. I believe it's 3 games after that loss to Detroit.
17, 17, and 5. So by points percentage, exactly 500.
Yeah. At the same time, you're looking at them and you're like, they've been 10-6 over the last month, and they're still around that 500 mark. So they've had to do a lot of work to get to this point. They're going to have to do a lot of work to move forward. I will say though, just last thing, small thing on that game against Detroit on New Year's Eve, dangerously incompetent referee.
I saw a grand total of 0 seconds of the game, but saw tweets about it. So I would assume it seems like it. Yeah.
Yeah. The slashing call on Malkin early in the game was weak. And what did that do? It gave all the momentum to the Detroit Red Wings. Another one in the second period on Cody Glass. And what did that do? It killed all the Penguins' momentum, gave it over to the Red Wings. And I believe that's one that led to a goal. No, it wasn't the second period. It was the second penalty. And that led to the goal for the Detroit Red Wings, or another goal. And then they had a huge error on the Rust one when the Penguins were on the power play that they overturned, but at the same time, they killed all the Penguins' momentum once again. So it didn't all directly lead to goals for the Detroit Red Wings, but a lot of these times, these poor calls or non-calls, I mean, Ben Sherratt absolutely mugged Evgeni Malkin, two-handing him in the post. They didn't call anything. So I think once you get to the point of it is dangerously incompetent, something needs to be done. This has been an issue kind of around the league, and it's affected every single team. So I'm not just saying it because it happened to the Penguins, but my God, was it just embarrassingly bad on the Stripes on New Year's Eve. And it was affecting the game, not just, hey, one big bad blown call changed the outcome of the game, but the entirety of the game. It was very one-sided. It was very homered. And I've seen that a lot of times, not just when the Penguins are on the road. So just dangerously incompetent. And it could have led to a very severe injury for Malkin's case because he got absolutely jumped.
Yeah, this has been an issue across the league for many years now. This is nothing new, but no matter what, things that always need to be worked on. I can't think of any massive examples from around the league that have sort of been, big time misses or big time droppings of the ball, but this is nothing new. From this whole thing, the whole officiating angle, the whole player safety angle, it's nothing new for the league, and something that maybe it eventually finds a way to get evened out. But with any luck, it's just one game at a time, and come back next game. Fresher mindset, different officiating crew, and you're looking to get back on it.
Yeah, they're never going to be perfect. They're going to make mistakes, and we all understand that. But to be consistently bad and to be dangerously bad like they were on New Year's Eve, that's when something needs to be said. And I'm sure Mike Sullivan had plenty to say about that, not just to the media, but because he did, but behind closed doors as well. We mentioned a couple minutes ago that the Penguins defense getting a lot of good news over this week. Marcus Pettersson returned to the lineup on Tuesday. We were talking here on Tuesday's episode saying he should be nearing his return, but we haven't really heard much. Well, not only does he return to practice in full capacity in the morning skate that day, he gets into the lineup against the Detroit Red Wings, so he is officially back. They're still without Kris Letang, who is deemed day-to-day with a lower body injury. They're still without Owen Pickering, who is day-to-day with an upper body injury that we know is a concussion, but he also practiced on Tuesday morning at the morning skate, full contact capacity. So his return is coming very soon. But to focus in on Marcus Pettersson, he returns 21 minutes, 36 seconds of total ice time, 3 shots on goal for the Dragon, 82% of the expected goals for at 5-on-5, which led all players for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was on the ice for all 3 Detroit goals, 2 of them on the penalty kill, but I think overall a pretty decent performance. I mean, you look at the first goal, yes, he let somebody get behind him, but it was a quick change of possession that I think you can point blame in a multitude of directions for that one. And on the penalty kill, I mean, whenever you're put on the penalty kill that many times, we already talked about the officiating. Don't need to get into that one. But overall, I thought a very steady game by Marcus Pettersson throughout. It begs the question, though, because we talked about this when he went down with injury, not knowing when he would come back, not knowing if it was going to be 6 games, which it ended up being, or if it was going to be a month to 6 weeks. Fortunately, it is on the front half of that week-to-week prognosis, and he is back in the lineup. But what we said, and specifically you said, I believe, was this is an opportunity for the Penguins to see what life without Pettersson would be if they chose to trade him this season. Did the defense's performance without him make you more or less confident in the Penguins potentially trading him at some point before the deadline here in a couple months?
Honestly, it's tough to say because while Pettersson was out, they were also missing Owen Pickering and Kris Letang for some of it. So it wasn't quite the perfect example of what would happen. However, it wasn't a terrible run. Obviously, they got good work out of Nate Clermont somehow, some way.
In one game, but yeah.
They liked what they saw from him in that contest, and they, I believe it was him that Sullivan said they brought him up because he's been playing well. Obviously, you're not going to call up someone who's not doing well, but it's they gave him the boost because he deserved it, and he went out in that contest and still showed what he could do and showed that he could be worth maybe a couple extra games if push came to shove and the lineup spots opened up for him. We didn't get to see the names like, Matt Call was playing in the Spangler Cup, so scratch that one. But we didn't get to see the names like Sebastian Aho get another chance or Philip Kral. And that's perfectly fine, but those are guys with NHL experience who break glass in case of emergency almost. You have those options. I think the Penguins learned that they can do it. They can perform on defense pretty well without Marcus Pettersson if that is the direction they're deciding to go in. One way or the other, it seems like this will be his last year in Pittsburgh because it really is either it's traded out or probably walk to free agency. We'll see how it goes. But the Penguins proved to themselves, at least in a 3-3 run, it's possible. It is not a traumatic downfall without him in the lineup. There is that whole, what's it called? Can't remember now. But there is that whole going at it by association. Everyone's going to step up in the absence, and it is how you fill the hole that he's left. And it's something that the Penguins are going to have to do, I think. It's not, like I said, he's like Marcus Pettersson's not having the greatest season. So it kind of helps that, when you lose into an injury, it's not, again, not to bash him, but it's like you're losing a ton at the moment. Thankfully, with short term, he's able to come back and build himself back up. The Penguins learned they can do stuff without him. I think that's sort of the big piece of it. And we'll see what happens going forward. I think, like I said, there are NHL names in that AHL lineup that's, if need be, they can also come back up and perform.
Yeah, I will say they didn't thrive without Marcus Pettersson. I don't think any of us expected them to, but they survived, and they did a little bit more, slightly more than surviving because, the penalty kill, which was the big marker for me, I said, I think that if the penalty kill struggles without him because he is your top penalty killing defenseman, that's a pretty glaring indication that you need him on that unit. But they went from 9th when he left the team to 7th by the time he returned. So they improved slightly in the top 10, not to mention the fact that their goals allowed per game played over those 6 games, again, a small sample size, were lower than the season average heading into that stretch. So 3.33 goals per game is not great, but still better than they had been doing throughout the season to that point. So again, surviving, not thriving without Marcus Pettersson. And I think the biggest thing that kind of cued me into, hey, they could actually do this during that stretch, because before that stretch, there was one thing that made me think, okay, it's going to be a little bit less of a heavy lift if they decide to do that and try to continue to vie for a playoff spot. And I'll get to that in a second. But Matt Grzelcyk, I thought, stepped up well with Erik Karlsson. The numbers underlying wise probably don't reflect it well, but considering where he was at whenever Pettersson got injured, let's not forget, he was very close to being dropped out of the lineup. He went from the first line and the first pair down to the third pair. The next step was out of the lineup. If it wasn't for his power play productivity, he probably would have been taken out of the lineup a lot sooner. But then the Pettersson injury happens. He's forced back up into the top 4, and he plays next to Erik Karlsson, something that all of us said, this is probably going to go absolutely horrendously. Well, maybe it's because Erik Karlsson has experienced probably his best stretch since joining the Penguins. Or maybe it's just because Matt Grzelcyk has elevated his game and it kind of woke him up. But that pairing has been better than expected. And whenever you consider Grzelcyk potentially being able to fill that role, and then you have Owen Pickering, who has emerged in general, it makes you feel a little bit more confident in the fact that, hey, they can trade Pettersson and not completely wave the white flag on this season.
Exactly. It was almost the way that you looked at Jake Guentzel last season. There were ways to, trade him away and get a good piece in return to Michael Bunting, but still kind of go for it. That wasn't the way everyone was viewing it. It really was more
I think they were in a much different situation because they were not playing well at all. And I don't think anybody expected them to go for it by the time they traded Guentzel, because they looked like a team that was getting ready for a draft lottery selection, not a team that was getting ready for a push for the playoffs.
Correct. But thankfully they got a guy like Michael Bunting in return and made it look, on paper at least, more like a hockey trade, if you will. If the Penguins can find something like that with Pettersson, that good on them. It's doubtful, but we'll have to wait and see. And you know how, Matt, you can really see that Matt Grzelcyk has stepped his game up, considering Marcus Pettersson returned to the lineup, usually staple gunned to Erik Karlsson, and that wasn't the pairing. Marcus Pettersson came back and played with P.O. Joseph.
Yeah.
That should go pretty far in showing that Matt Grzelcyk has stepped his game up and is playing pretty decently with Erik Karlsson, the guy no one can play with except for Marcus Pettersson. So, again, that shows the way Matt Grzelcyk has stepped up. If the Penguins decide that the best direction for Marcus Pettersson is to trade him, ideally, no matter what, as if you are a Penguin fan or if you are an enjoyer of this team, you always want trades to be a hockey trade like the Jake Guentzel one, where, yeah, sure, you're losing a huge piece in Jake Guentzel, but you're getting, finally, he's a useful piece again, a guy like Michael Bunting in return, who has stepped his game up since the beginning of the season, who played really well last year after the trade, and it turned into what could be a key piece to this lineup going forward. Again, it's not apples to apples of a comparison here between Guentzel and Bunting, but if the Penguins can find a decent piece in return for Marcus Pettersson, suddenly it would have to be the kind of piece that is Michael Bunting, where it's just not working there, and maybe something revitalizes something in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that trade was kind of a mix because you have the future assets, you have the pieces that are going to help with the rebuild, but you had that little piece of instant gratification, an instant return with Michael Bunting. If you can get that for Pettersson, I think it appeases both sides of the fan base, because a large portion of the Penguins fan base is like, burn it down, get all the pieces for the future. If you're able to play the middle like he did, again, I know people were upset about the trade return because it didn't have a first round pick stapled to it, but when you look into it, you ended up with 3 very solid pieces, 2 that are pretty close to NHL ready, that are playing very well at the American Hockey League level, in Ponomarev and Koivunen. And then you also have to add in the fact that second round pick turned into Harrison Brunick. So no matter if it's a first or a second, as long as your scouts do their job properly and you get the good piece, who cares that Harrison Brunick was a second round pick? Because when you look at first round picks, Sam Poulin hasn't turned into very much, and he was a first round pick. So look a little bit further beyond the title. But I agree with you, that little piece of instant gratification, that little piece of instant kind of feedback of, oh, we got Michael Bunting as well. So the futures, that's great. That was the intention of the trade. It's nice to have this as well. So maybe they can pull that off with Marcus Pettersson. The thing is, nobody is going to be a 1-for-1 replacement for Pettersson. Nobody that's currently in the organization, nobody that you're going to get back in the trade. And in that aspect, it is very similar to Guentzel, because nobody you brought in was ever going to be Jake Guentzel, particularly last year, this year, or next year. That just wasn't going to be the case. But the Penguins are still leaning into a rebuild here, and we have to have that sense of reality as we move forward. And I think that is what's going to kind of fuel Penguins fans, is knowing that, hey, Grzelcyk on a 1-year deal has been bad for most of the season, but he stepped up and showed he can play with Karlsson. Owen Pickering has stepped up and showed he can handle 20-plus minutes a night, despite the fact that he had no professional hockey experience besides a handful of games coming into this season. So that gives you a little bit of relief, knowing that, hey, This trade is still probably coming, but the Penguins can survive without Pettersson for the remainder of this season if it comes to it. So I liked what I saw out of the Penguins defense. I liked what I saw out of Matt Grzelcyk for the most part. I think especially on Tuesday, I liked a lot of what I saw from Matt Grzelcyk. I think he's starting to get a little bit of confidence with all of this increased performance and increased opportunity. And I think it's starting to show certainly in his game. Let's close out this episode by trying to figure out the top moments of 2024 for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, before we get into this, I am going to say this. This is obviously going to turn into a poll that we put up on our community page on our YouTube channel, but I am intentionally, for the purposes of the poll, intentionally throwing out anything that has to deal with Jaromir Jagr. And that's everything involved. That's the jersey retirement, and it's wholesome. It's the picture of the skyline that week. It's the bobblehead saga. It's the mullets during warmups. It's Jagr's curtain call, which I think if you needed to condense the best moment, the best 5 to 10 seconds, it's Jagr's curtain call. But because that is going to blow away anything else we put in a poll, we're just going to flat out say that was the top moment for the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2024. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. We were discussing then that strap in Penguins fans, because that jersey retirement is going to be the last bright spot of that season. Turned out to not be. I mean, they did go on a decent run at the end of the season to kind of give everyone hope for maybe another playoff push. But immediately following that, I mean, hell, the game immediately following that jersey retirement was good, and then it was a disaster. Then there were some games afterwards that continued that disaster. Again, they turned it on late in the season, but we said at the time, this is the last big thing that's going to happen this season. Turned out to be the year. But yeah, overall, it's that whole weekend, essentially, from him showing up at the practicing with the team. Then obviously the whole jersey retirement moment, the former Penguins on hand, the jersey retirement itself, his speech, the going out for practice, for warmups. I mean, it was all just, and then he was here the whole weekend. He took the rooms away from Drake, which was awesome.
Yeah.
It was quite a fun weekend for Jaromir Jagr and the Penguins, and definitely the highlight of 2024 as a whole, because really what else, I mean, we have a few here, but what else sticks out like that? Not much.
Yeah, for a team that didn't make the playoffs, for a team that outside of 2 winning stretches, that one you mentioned already, which was the last 12 to 13 games of last season and the last 12 to 15 games of the calendar year, outside of that, there hasn't been a whole lot to call home about. Now, what there has been is a lot of milestones. So that's what's going to be in a lot of these options. So how would you rank these moments? Because outside of Jagr, we want to find what the best on-ice moment was for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I got 3 here, and if I missed any, or what, you can feel free to tell me. And if you're a listener, feel free to drop it in the comment section below, and we'll talk about it next Tuesday. But I got 3 here, and I think that I have mine picked out, and we'll see if you agree. First and foremost, the only one from last season that I'm putting in this list, April 11th, 2024, Erik Karlsson keeps the Penguins' playoff hopes alive in overtime to take down the Detroit Red Wings. Not only did that get them a win over a team that they were battling, but for the time being, it put them into a playoff spot, and it gave them control of their own destiny. Now, we know how that played out. We know that they ended up botching it, but for the time being, Erik Karlsson put the Penguins in the driver's seat for a playoff spot in 2024. That was by far, to me, his best moment in year 1 with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Not to mention the fact that Crosby had the primary assist, and that was his 1,000th in his career. So Karlsson keeps playoff hopes alive in OT. That is 1. 2, another option here, Evgeni Malkin scores his 500th goal, a massive milestone for any NHL player. That happened on October 16th of 2024. Of course, Sidney Crosby has the only assist on that goal. Sid also picked up his 1,600th point in that same game, and the Penguins win in overtime off of Crosby's first goal of this season. But a great moment for Evgeni Malkin early as he pots his 500th goal. And the last moment I'll throw out there is one that happened less than a week ago. Sidney Crosby passes Mario Lemieux for the Penguins' all-time record in assists. December 29th, 2024. Waited until the last home game of the year, like we mentioned on the last episode. Sid has a flair for the dramatic, but he now sits at 1,035 assists, picking up a secondary on Drew O'Connor's power play goal on Tuesday. Anytime you pass Mario Lemieux, it is a special, special moment. I don't think enough was made of that moment, and that's why it is also going to be one of the three we picked here. So Karlsson keeps the playoff hopes alive last season. Malkin scores 500, or Crosby passes Lemieux. Horwat, how would you rank these moments? And are there any that I missed?
There's none that you missed that I can think of off the top of my head. Like I said, it was kind of I don't want to say lousy year, but it was a year just that was Yager and milestones. One piece that you missed about the Erik Karlsson one is why I want to give that one a bump. That was game 999 for him.
Yeah.
I was trying to, that's what I was, while you were speaking, I was trying to also figure out exactly which game that was, because I remember it being right around that 1,000th game mark, if not game 1,000. It was 999. He sent them off into a huge win over Detroit, and then immediately got the 1,000th game celebration 2 nights later. So I think that sort of added to the legend of that moment. I think that one deserves a bit more of a bump just because it kept the Penguins alive for the time being. It kept them in the race. And it was just a good moment for himself to then go on and have a great celebration a couple nights later. And I think that, and I get why a lot of people don't give the assists thing as much love as they do, because it's assists. I mean, they're only talked about whenever they're at such high numbers, like guys like Mario, guys like Crosby. And I would say I like your order. I just wanted to give the Karlsson thing that little extra bump just because that sort of added to the magnitude of the moment as well. Just, of course, it was him in that moment, and he had a terrible game leading up to that too, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. I believe he was the reason for 2 goals in the third period. 2 Detroit goals. Let me just say
Yes.
that. Let me clarify there.
It was a very typical Erik Karlsson game, a 6-5 final. As I'm looking at Jeff Carter scored a shorthanded goal that game. Now that I'm thinking about it and remembering that game, that was a nuts affair.
It was one of a couple crazy games that happened late last season. And that's when I was looking for these moments. I was like, which games have a standout moment? And that Karlsson one, I think, was the one that comes top of mind. But the Tampa Bay win on home ice during that stretch was huge. The road win against the Rangers was massive in a year where they were going on to win the President's Trophy. The win at Prudential Center the following game was absolutely massive. I mean, you can also add on the win that they had in Washington. I was there in person. Had everybody believing, okay, this team is for real. There were a lot of big wins. There were a lot of great games late last season, but I think it all culminated with Karlsson and in the waning weeks of the season, putting them in the driver's seat. And that's why that match with overtime matched with just the celebration too. You can't mistake him dropping to his knees and almost looking like, finally, I made my stamp on this fan base. They finally might accept me. Now, again, we saw what happened following that. Yeah. They immediately fell out of the playoff race and then lost in a meaningless game to the Islanders. But that was a huge moment for Karlsson.
Yeah, it was, like I said, it's one of the few games that I can vividly remember as well. Like I said, the Jeff Carter shorthanded goal early in the third period to put the Penguins up by 2, by the way.
Yeah.
That was later blown. Like I said, Alex Nedeljkovic did not really steal games toward the end of the year. I can remember Jeff Hathorn looking to me after every Lucas Raymond goal. The kid's good. He scored 3 that game.
Yeah.
He's pretty good. And Erik Karlsson capping it off in game 999 and adding to that sort of magnitude. Zach Aston-Reese took a penalty that game, by the way, for the Detroit Red Wings. That dude has gotten around. I thought there was more to it. It's very reminiscent of that Evgeni Malkin goal against the Capitals in 2023. Mm-hmm. The Penguins fighting for the playoff spot then, trying to do everything they can to keep them in. Malkin scores that huge goal to keep them in that race and has that big celebration that we all remember. It felt like that. It felt like those late season moments that the Penguins were in desperate need of. And again, the overall outcome, not as memorable and definitely less fun than a playoff berth, but these are quite the quite the moments to remember. Jeff Petrie also scored for the Red Wings this game.
Mhm.
I can't get over this this score sheet.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, you've been filibustering here to not give a ranking. How would you rank these three? I've let you filibuster long enough. What is the number one? What is the number two? Where do you rank these guys?
I briefly said I like your ranking, and I think I'm going to hold to it. Like Karlsson at 3, just because it didn't sort of culminate into more. Was it the Malkin? Yeah, Malkin's 500th goal is 2. And then, obviously Crosby's milestone assist as number 1, just because, again, you're right, that doesn't get enough love. It doesn't get enough attention.
Yeah.
I mean, you get it. It's assists, but also, like we said, Mario Lemieux put up those numbers in about 600 games.
Yeah. I mean, anytime you pass Lemieux, that's to me, that's number 1. Like Crosby passing Lemieux, just say that. It doesn't matter what follows it. That immediately should go at the top of the list. If he passes him in anything. So Crosby passing Lemieux to me is number 1. I would say Karlsson is probably number 2 over Malkin. I understand 500 is a huge, huge milestone when it comes to goal scoring. And almost everybody, I think it's like 97%, 98% of players that reach 500 goals also reach Toronto and the Hockey Hall of Fame. Not that it wasn't already a foregone conclusion for Malkin, but it just means more when the playoffs are on the line. And for that, I'm giving it to Karlsson. Also because Malkin scored that in the first period of a game that ended up going absolutely haywire. Following that, they ended up winning that one, I believe, 6-5 as well on home ice. But Karlsson, to put the Pens in the driver's seat, I'll put that at number 2, and Crosby obviously will be at number 1. So let us know in the comments section what you have as this order, and then also if you have another top moment. What were your thoughts if you were there on the Jaromir Jagr situation the entire weekend? Let us know some of your favorite memories from Pittsburgh Penguins 2024. I know a lot of the time it wasn't great, but sometimes it was, as we outlined in this segment here. But that's going to do it for this episode of The Tip of the Iceberg, the first episode of 2025. Hopefully we have plenty more of these when we're talking about wins and not losses. Hopefully by the end of this year, we can have a discussion about some more fantastic moments on the ice for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But that's going to do it for this one. Make sure you find us on YouTube at Tip of the Iceberg. Like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Or you can catch us out anywhere you get your podcast from. We'll see you guys next time.